Hello everyone and welcome to Cinderful Gaming. I hope you're all doing well, I hope you're all staying safe, and most of all, I hope you're all fighting that war against the Grey. Today's video, we're going to be talking about getting started with all of the Warhammer Age of Sigmar armies from the Destruction Grand Alliance. We did a video talking about the 5 best and worst armies to get started with in Warhammer Age of Sigmar 3rd edition not too long ago, and so we were asked to, well, focus on all the armies. So today we're going to take a look at all the Destruction armies, and we've got videos up already of all the other different Grand Alliances as well. So you can go check those ones out if that's an army that interests you as well. But in this video, what we aim to do is we're going to talk about how these armies are with getting started. We've got a criteria that we've been using to determine whether or not we personally think an army is a good starting point or not. And honestly, no army is ever a bad starting point. If you enjoy the models, if those models really speak to you, that is the army for you. This maybe will just be some information for you on things to maybe consider when you're getting into that army. You definitely want to know all the information and know where your army stands in a bunch of these different areas when you get into it, so that you're not met with any surprises and you know exactly what you are getting into. With that said, let's get cracking on and let's check out the criteria before we move into checking all the armies out. And so here we have our criteria for whether or not we think an army is better or worse at getting started with in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. First of all, we want to make sure that army has a start collecting box or a similar easy entry point. Throughout the year you may find dual boxes or launch boxes for various armies, though these are not always available and are generally limited time products. Same as the battle forces that come out every year, you generally can find that there are some that may have different armies that give you great starting points for certain armies. If you're interested in seeing what battle forces came out this year for Warhammer Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40,000, we've got videos on the channel entitled such. Also, we want to make sure that the army fits in the starter set as well. This is definitely the same as being in either one of these types of boxes. Model count is extremely important as well for when getting into an army. You don't want to have an army of 200 models as your first ever army, at least not without knowing that that's going to be the case, because it can be a little bit of a daunting task. This, of course, with this model count, can affect the next few things we're going to talk about. First of all, cost of the army goes up the more models you have to buy, obviously, so elite armies can generally be a little bit cheaper, even if the models are more expensive individually themselves. Painting skills required, like there is a thing to be said that quantity requires its own set of painting skills, as it requires much more time to get those models painted, and much more effort to sort of slog through so many models. But also, on the other side, you don't want to get highly detailed miniatures and not have the painting skills required, or maybe be a little bit intimidated by such models. Summoning is a massive issue as well. This, of course, summoning on top of an already horde-style army is definitely something to be aware of, because that can really rack up both the cost and the amount of models you're going to have to paint, and summoning in general just ups the amount of models you're going to have to paint regardless. Multiple ways to play the army is a really important thing for us, because you want to be able to move this army around and play in different styles, and also buy extra models to change how your army plays as well, to give you a wide pool of ways to play. Ease of play is also really essential for us in the game, because you want to have an army that's easy to understand and easy to play on the tabletop. Some armies have really complex rules, and some armies have a lot of really complex rules on top of that, that can make ease of play a little bit of an issue when getting started in Warhammer Age of Sigmar. And last but certainly not least, we want to talk about competitiveness, because while this isn't everything, it's important to understand where your army sits in the competitive sort of scene, because while you may pick up an army, it might be one of the low tier armies in the competitive scene. So if you're versing all your friends who have really strong armies, you may find it's harder to win games. So it's important to understand where your army sits in that respect, so you don't get any nasty surprises and you don't get down when maybe you're not winning as many games as you maybe thought you would. Or you maybe get a little bit of an ego because you're winning games with an army that we consider to be down the bottom. And so, to start off with, we're going to talk about Gloomspike Gits. Gloomspike Gits are an interesting army. First of all, they have a star collecting box. However, it's an issue with the star collecting box. First of all, I like to think of it as a taster box rather than a great starting point for an army. Gloomspike Gits work really well in sort of their secular little sub-factions of the army. So the army works well as being either really trog heavy, really squig heavy, or really grot heavy, or really spider heavy. It doesn't really meld together well when you start trying to mix equal balances of everything. It becomes a little bit muddled at that point. The start collecting box gives you different pieces. It gives you Squig Herd, a Gloomspike Gits grot character, and some trogs. And so it gives you a taste of all these different pieces in the army, but doesn't really give you a cohesive starting point for your force. This is, I guess, the issue with Gloomspike Gits in how they play. Model count for the army is another one that can vastly be quite different. Now, any of the non-Trog armies are definitely much more model heavy. Even the cavalry armies like Squigs and Spiders definitely have a lot of cavalry models. Trogs are definitely the elite style of the army, and you won't get an army that goes anywhere above probably about the 30 model mark at very, very maximum, which is cool. So this is a great way to get into the army if you're wanting to get Gloomspike kits to start with. Go a Trog heavy force to start with, because it won't require you to get many models. Though of course the Trogs are more expensive than any of the other kits, being a more elite unit. The cost of the army for Gloomspike kits isn't awfully terrible for a Horde army. Their grots are generally a little bit cheaper, being an older kit, and things like Spiders are a little bit cheaper. Trogs and Squigs tend to be the most expensive kits from the army. The army doesn't have any summoning, so this is a great thing. So while it's a Horde army, you're not going to have to expand and get more stuff on the table from summoning, which is really, really nice. It does have some mechanics that bring models back to your army, but this is much like a lot of the death stuff, where it's rather returning models that you've already had on the table back to the table, rather than adding brand new units. This, of course, leads into the painting skills. While you're having to paint a lot of models, grots are really, really easy to paint. They're a simple black color and green. Like, you can use 4 color minimum and your grots will look amazing and get to the table really, really quickly. So while they are a Horde army, they're definitely one of the ones that comes together really, really, really quickly. Some of the more elite units, things like Squigs and the Trogs, definitely have a lot more stuff to them, though they have some really easy painting schemes you can find on Warhammer TV. There's some fantastic ones for getting your Squigs done nice and quickly, with some dry brushing techniques, and Trogs with scales and all that come together really nicely and quickly as well with dry brushing. The army does have multiple ways to play, as we've mentioned. You can play Trogs, you can play Spiders, you can play Squigs, you can play Grots, and you can play sort of mixes with the armies. So you've got a lot of different multiple ways to play. And then on top of that, we've got the ease of play as well of the army, which I guess is the big downside for the army. Trogs are really easy to play. Go forward and smash with Trogs. They're really easy. Squigs, much the same. The Grots and the Spiders require a lot more buffing, and especially the Grots require a lot of sort of play with debust and all of that make them a lot harder to play. This is further compounded by the fact the army isn't really that competitive at the moment. It definitely is probably one of the 2 worst armies competitively in the game at the moment. This is a struggle for an army that looks so amazing on the tabletop. You can check out Grots in action on the channel. We've got some bat reps of them that have gone up recently and you might find interesting. But the army does sort of struggle and does require maybe a little bit of fixes, but who knows, this may be something new in the future. Competitiveness always changes and the army looks absolutely amazing. Next, we have the Ogremoore Tribes. So for starters, they have a fantastic start collecting box for the Beastclaw Raider half of the army. It is probably one of the 2 best start collecting boxes in the entire game, and it's just amazing at getting you an army on the table really, really cheap. You can buy 4 of these Beastclaw Raider start collecting boxes really cheap, finding second-hand sellers, or even going onto an online store, finding a discount at a local friendly game store or something like that, and grab 4 of these and you have an amazing army. What's great about these is the monster kit inside there actually has 6 different build options for you. You can build either Beast Riders of either various mounts, you can build the Huskards, or you can build the Frost Lords of either mount option. So you've got so much to do. This, of course, with the start collecting boxes, it means your model count goes way down with the army. And not only that, even if you expand into the Gutbusters or pick up the Gutbusters, your model count won't go into anything massive with this army, as you're generally not going to look to get above anywhere near the 50 model mark. You'll probably be well below it in most cases. The lack of summoning is certainly a good part of the army. You don't have any, which is nice, so you're not having to bring any extra models in from summoning. And this, once again, just knocks down that cost of the army as well, not having to purchase anything extra. Painting skill-wise, ogres go together really easily, especially the Beastclaw Raiders. Large areas of skin work well with contrast paints. Metals can be done with really dull brown washes to really make them stand out and really make them look worn and dirty like the ogres themselves. And also, all the furs and all of that can be done really easy on the big beasts with dry brushing. There's some fantastic techniques to show you all how to paint some ogres in really quick and easy ways. Go find the Warhammer TV How to Paint a Thundertusk Beast Rider on Warhammer TV. It's a really great tutorial. I used it for my own and it made painting them an absolute breeze. Multiple ways to play is one way the ogres work as well. There's definitely some builds in there that play with Beast Claw Raider halves, that play with the Gutbusters, and the Gutbusters have a few different plays in them as well. So you've got quite a few options when playing around with your ogres. Start collecting boxes, start with Beast Claw Raiders, and eventually move into Gutbusters and play a different of the variation Gutbuster builds that you have access to. Ease of play with ogres is certainly a massive boon. This makes them one of the best armies to get into the game with, just that they want to go across the table and fight. You certainly have some more tricksy builds in there, things like bringing Yetis, and even the Underguts can make some really interesting builds in the army, but definitely one of the more easy armies to play with some of the more basic ways. Competitiveness, ogres always just sit in that middle. They're a very swingy army that can charge in and destroy pretty much any army on the table with a good amount of power that they have, and their mortal wounds on the charge, but also they can be quite swingy at times, so can lose to pretty much anyone in the game. They're a great army that's a bit of a hit and miss in your competitive scene wherever you go. Oryx War Clans are next, and these are a fantastic army to get into with Warhammer Age of Sigmar. For starters, they not only have start collecting boxes for the Iron Jaws range, but the Cruel Boys range of the army is inside the current Warhammer Age of Sigmar 3rd edition starter sets. So there's just a ton of great ways to get models really cheap. What's great about them is you can just get a bunch of really good models at a really cheap cost, and even the units after, thanks to being a starter army, they generally don't cost awfully much to get many of their units. Model count for the army can be really elite. Maybe if you're going into buying a lot of Hobgrots or Bone Splitters, you might have a more horde style army, but even then you're not going to be breaking the biggest hordes in the game. You're just going to have a lot of bodies. Cost of the army, thanks to those starter boxes and the start collecting boxes, can be a really cheap way to get into the game. There's fantastic miniatures across the line that you can get into really cheap. Not only that, but they're generally not that expensive kits, as we mentioned. Even the more hoardy units like your Bone Splitters can be relatively cheap to get into, thanks to being a little bit of an older kit. Lack of summoning is great for the army. Like, no summoning means you're not having to spend that extra cost, which is always a bonus for getting into an army. And painting skills. All these armies go together really differently, but all require some very basic painting skills. The Bone Splitters take green contrast really well to get that up, and you can even try some freehand techniques if you want, with some tattoos with nice large flat areas to practice on. The Iron Jaws have nice large areas of plate which take both colour and metallics really well. The Cruel Boys are perhaps the most intricately detailed army, but with some basic techniques you can paint them up really quickly. Once again, Warhammer TV have some techniques that they can show you to paint this army up really quickly at a very basic level, and then show you some advanced techniques on top of it as well. Multiple ways to play is certainly something that Oryx do really well. With the 3 distinct subfactions in Iron Jaws, Cruel Boys, and Bone Splitters, you also have the Big War on top of that, which is sort of an amalgamation of all 3, playing in a very different style to any of the other 3 armies. This gives you loads of options. You can pick up and start collecting Iron Jaws and start with Iron Jaws, or start with Cruel Boys picking up the starter set, and then move into the other subfactions. And meanwhile, while you're halfway between and getting another subfaction, play with Big War. It's a fantastic way to have multiple ways to play, as it allows you to seamlessly move through the various different subfactions of the army, never having models that you can't play with on the tabletop. Ease of play definitely varies between the various different factions, as does competitiveness, so we'll talk about each one in turn. Iron Jaws are super competitive right now, and they are relatively easy to play. Buff up your pieces and go smash is pretty much the strategy. Cruel Boys are a little bit harder to play because they require a little bit of pre-planning and strategy, and sort of aligning your units in the right places, but are a really strong competitive army. Bone Splitters are definitely down the bottom of the pack, really, and Big War floats around somewhere in the middle. Bone Splitters not being awfully competitive, but definitely having builds in there. If you want to check out some fantastic Bone Splitter content, go check out Plastic Rack on his blog. Fantastic destruction player with so much information for all the destruction armies. And finally, for destruction, we have the Sons of Behemoth. They're an army that I actually think are really good at getting into Warhammer Age of Sigmar. Now, for starters, they don't have a start collecting box or any Battle Force boxes or anything like that, because the models are such a huge part of the army and cost a decent amount for each model that you generally don't need start collecting box. I mean, a start collecting box for a Mega Gargant would be, what, half a Mega Gargant? You get the legs and you get the heart, you got to go buy another torso. Model count for the army is the lowest in Age of Sigmar. At max, this army can be 10 models strong. At lowest, it could be 4, which is just awesome. This does lower the cost of the army, though not dramatically. Mega Gargants are one of the more expensive kits in the entirety of Warhammer Age of Sigmar, so this does raise the cost, but knowing that you only need to buy 4 of them can be relatively cheap. You can also cheapen up the army by buying some of the Man-Crusher Gargants to start off with, lowering your entry cost for the army. 2 Mega Gargants get you a 1,000-point army, or 3 Man-Crushers and a Mega Gargant get you a 1,000-point army on the table, easy as that. The army, of course, doesn't have any summoning, which is awesome, so it means you're never going above that 10 model mark, ever. Multiple ways to play is really fun with the army, because while you have the same models, it depends on which Mega Gargant is your leader, it depends what tribe you're from for the army, and this changes how your army can play in certain ways. You can be an objective holding army, you can be a more destructive against hordes, and you've got all these cool different ways to play, which is really fun. The army obviously is relatively easy to play. While it doesn't play a traditional game, many of the armies want to just hold objectives and sit on them with your Gargants, beating up things that come near you. It doesn't require you to learn an awful lot and does make for an easy way to play with the army. Competitiveness, Gargants are absolutely smashing it, pun intended there, at the top of the competitive meta at the moment. They've got a really strong win rate, and the Gargants are just strong enough at the moment that they'll carry you a few games all by themselves of just being Gargants. So Gargants really are a great army. While they don't have a star collecting box, they don't need it because they are so few models, and they've got the ability of great painting to get them in. You've got large flat areas that take contrast really well, but you can learn extra painting techniques on top of that. I've seen some amazing painted Gargant armies. Go check out Ash McEwen on Twitter if you want to see the most amazing Gargant army ever, but they are a really easy army to get into Warhammer Age of Sigmar with nonetheless, thanks to all the reasons down below. Well, that's the end of the video. We hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And while you're at it, drop us a comment below in the comment section and let us know what you enjoyed about the video. If you'd like to come chat more with me and other members of our fine little community here at Cinderful Gaming, you can do so by following the link in the video's description to our Discord server. Lastly, we'd like to give a shout out to everyone who supports the channel via Patreon and YouTube members, and you can go help support the channel via Patreon and YouTube members as well and get access to, if you're a YouTube member, some of our awesome little gifts or get choice of what we're going to do for content on the channel. You can follow those links in the description of the video to Patreon and YouTube members. But a shout out to them all, our Patreons: Christian Weir, James Soren, Greenskins Gaming, AJC, Kenny Lyle, Outer and Shot First, Andrew Bowen, Nathan Fee, The Rising Ape, Pure Dynamic, Agu, Anthony B, Anton Nilsson, JJ Austrian, Average Wargamer, Domir, Mark Harvey, and James Cater. And to our YouTube members as well, a special shout out to Green Roots Gaming, Kenton Young, Chris Wallace, Aronya, Vinny, Lockloric, The Johnny84, David Ellsworth, Revenar, Wolfric Nick, and Broken Chef. Lastly, I'd like to give a special shout out first of all to Lady Witchvox Art, who does all the amazing artwork for the channel that you see here, and to Xmorphic, who does all the amazing work and the background work for our Discord server. Thank you both very much for all your help. That's it for today though, everyone. Stay safe, stay well, and most of all, keep fighting that war against the Grey. Ciao for now.